Look, I know it's going to drive many people on the right crazy, but it is important to know what exactly we are paying for right now with education. We can talk about cutting all we want every time we bring up the cost of education, things of that nature, the per pupil rate and things of that nature. But if you don't understand what the money is currently going towards, how are you going to properly fix it without just breaking the system? I'm about to speak here now with the New Hampshire School Administrators Association. They're the equivalent to the NEA here in the state, the Teachers Association. This is their role. It's the administrators. I really appreciate them taking the time to speak with me. It's Dr. Mark MacLean, who's the executive director, and Mr. Jerry Frew, who is the associate executive director over there. They've got experience working in the field as school administrators. They're at the State House. They're working with the various superintendents across the state. Let's start to break down what exactly their role is, why it costs so much. These offices are very expensive. Why is it they cost so much? It's pretty simple, the reason why they do, and we'll talk about that. I don't necessarily agree with everything that they've said per se, but it's their opinion, and they're here to represent the superintendents and the administrators, and I feel like they truly believe in what it is they're promoting. It's not some political BS or anything like that, and they actually kept it pretty apolitical. And once again, I also don't agree with some of the school funding things that you brought up later with regards to the amount of state impact and where the money's coming from. But hey, give it a listen, give them an honest chance to make their case, and it's just interesting to learn what this important aspect of how K-12 school districts operate. Once again, you shouldn't break something unless we figure out why they're there. This is the case that's always made by conservatives against progressives, for example. Conservatives and libertarians should try their damnedest not to repeat the mistakes of those they fight with regularly politically. Let's get to know what's going on and then figure out the best path forward.
The New England Take.
This is part of my ongoing series on the cost of education. Obviously, part of the cost of education is the administration of schools, how they operate, how they work as multiple buildings within these various SAUs and things of that nature. So to start off with, can you give like the 50,000-foot view of the role of the superintendent's office serves in the local school district, especially in New Hampshire?
Sure. I'm going to defer to my mentor, friend, and colleague, Jerry Frew, as he has a really well-crafted answer for this.
Well, thank you, Mark. First, I would suggest that what we're really talking about is the value of education as opposed to the cost of education, because I think education, and particularly public schools, are a great value to our communities and to our democracy. The superintendent's role is kind of the chief executive officer for the school district and the SAU in general, really responsible for everything soup to nuts. You know, the buck stops here with the superintendent. And that includes pulling together an effective team at the SAU level, whether that be assistant superintendents or curriculum folks or business officials and student services directors and human resource folks, facilities directors, really a full team of folks geared toward really delivering the community its highest value for education.
How much does this role change between the city schools that have many buildings, many sub-businesses, essentially, if you want to think of it more of a corporate world, versus you go into the more super rural jurisdictions of like Coos County, where they may have one school that serves a majority of the entire K-12 population?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one real quick, and please, Jerry, interrupt me at any time. I think the smaller districts, the superintendent ends up wearing more hats. For example, the superintendent becomes the HR director, becomes the payroll coordinator, becomes the first line of defense for technology. And the smaller the system, the more eclectic the work is for the superintendent.
Definitely. In some of our smaller systems, the superintendent also serves as the building principal, on occasion the bus driver for special education services, and in one small district served as the Beaver Dam disruptor because the facilities individual was out ill and the Beaver Dam was in danger of flooding out the school. And so the superintendent donned the waders and took care of a beaver dam. So probably the Manchester superintendent doesn't have to do that much. But some of our small rural districts have a wider swath of responsibilities. And at the end of the day, it's whatever it takes.
Now, how does the role differ between the principal of the building of this individual school versus the superintendent? What's the difference in the roles there?
Mark, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I would say that the most significant difference is in working with the school board. The superintendent is in charge of all of the systems, whether it's transportation, facilities, curriculum instruction and assessment, student achievement, communications, any of the important systems that a school district is empowered with. The superintendent is charged with the oversight, direction, vision, and implementation of all of those initiatives that impact all of those systems, obviously with the overarching goal of ensuring that there is student success and opportunity embedded into each one of those systems. The principal is charged with being on a leadership team, an overarching and pre-K through 12 leadership team, but is more focused on the operations of a building rather than the operations of an entire system. So with that comes supervision and evaluation of specific roles and staff members that are assigned to that particular building, parent communications with that particular building, and then working, as I said, as part of a larger leadership team. Whereas the superintendent then works with the school board, who are the elected officials, not necessarily officials, but elected community members who serve as the conduit to the community relative to the overarching operation of the school district itself.
Perhaps another subtle difference is in the personnel management side. Obviously, the principal is dealing with building personnel on a day-to-day basis, but in terms of the larger issues of any types of investigations and hearings and appeals and that type of thing, the superintendent jumps in, as well as collective bargaining issues and helping develop supervision and evaluation instruments for really all components of the organization. So it's a much broader view, a much broader area of responsibility than what the building principal has, in addition to the state reports and complying with all of the various reporting requirements from the state, from inspections. And, the principal may accompany the custodian through a building inspection, but at the end of the day, the superintendent is responsible for all of the buildings and the facilities in a given school system.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good transition to what that relationship is between the State Department of Education and the school districts. I mean, I'd imagine a majority of what the DOE is going to be looking for interaction is going to be with that superintendent. What does that look like?
We really value and our partnership with the Department of Ed and try to craft a bi-directional and mutually beneficial relationship. We invite the department to all of our statewide, regional, and executive board meetings to make sure that folks are hearing proper updates. And we also connect with the department and various divisions of the department for collaborative initiatives and projects, for example, looking at certification and licensure pathways to make sure that we're holding a high level of standard and expectation, but also offering some flexible pathways. We work with the department all the time to make sure that grants are understood, grant language can be talked about collaboratively, to make sure that whether it's the IDEA grant, it's the Title IV grant, it's the REAP grant, it's the Title I grant, or a variety of grants that districts get, both from mostly from the feds, but flows through the department, that everything is done there in a way that makes sense and is to a certain level of accountability. So we certainly work very closely with the Department of Education, to the point that with the State Board of Education, we have a spot on every single one of the State Board of Education's agendas where we get to highlight a district that's doing something innovative with students, doing something innovative with programming, and we oftentimes bring students, teachers, administrators to a State Board of Education meeting to showcase and highlight something that's happening there so that the state board folks can get a look at what's happening in public schools in New Hampshire.
So this probably should have been my first question, but I'll ask it now. Who does the New Hampshire School Administrators Association represent when you're looking at your local school district?
So the New Hampshire School Administrators Association works with all of the district leaders in the state. So it could be superintendents, assistant superintendents, business administrators, district level HR folks. We just signed an affiliate membership agreement with the chief technology officers, which we're really excited about. So we try to represent all of the district level or system level folks and give them a membership and a cohort of colleagues that they can learn from and share with. And we do a wide swath of professional development connected to superintendent and system level licensure. We also host regional meetings. As I alluded to before, we have statewide meetings, and we provide information from the department, from outside sources, from partners around the state, and from affiliate organizations to make sure that we kind of look at ourselves as the connective tissue for all system leaders. And so essentially, with the 108 districts that are in New Hampshire that are covered by 104 superintendents, they represent the 166,000 kids that are in public schools in New Hampshire. So we like to think that we are the connective tissue for the superintendents who are representing the 166,000 public school students in New Hampshire.
So the New Hampshire NEA tends to get a lot of the headlines. Everyone's focused on the teachers' side. I mean, how much do you guys do on the legislative for the lobbying side of things and working with the media and things of that nature?
Well, there's a reason why Jerry's wearing a suit right now, so I'll pass that one over to him.
AJ, we have a presence in the legislature. At the end of the day, the decisions that are made in the legislature, our members are going to be responsible for implementing. And so it's important for us to understand the reasons behind and the rationale behind various proposed pieces of legislation. We work closely with the New Hampshire School Boards Association in policy development, and getting back to something that you brought up earlier, one of the differences between principals and superintendents. Superintendents work closely with boards to develop policies, and at the end of the day, that the principals are going to have to help implement at the building level. But we work mindfully to try to educate our friends in the legislature about the consequences, be they intended or unintended consequences of their decisions and their actions. And then at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of our members to implement their decisions.
Yeah, and I would add that we don't necessarily think of ourselves as lobbyists at all. We recognize that the term lobbying is an umbrella term for any association that tracks and reports out on legislation. We track and report on legislation in preparation for policies and implementation. We also strive to make appropriate relationships, to connect with people, and provide technical advice about the applicability of pieces of legislation that are proposed in the various chambers. So, for example, if there's a piece of legislation and either senators or representatives want to have an insight into what it would mean in application or the impact it could have on a community, on various communities, we raise our hands and say we're willing to provide that information. But our goal is not to necessarily lobby, it's just to provide information, because we represent people with a wide variety of viewpoints and beliefs, and we recognize that our goal isn't to sway those viewpoints or beliefs, but to make sure that people are making those decisions with an understanding of all the potential ramifications.
All right, let's move over to funding, and here's my one very pointed question that I had prepped ahead of time. So right now we're talking about across the board, the cost of education per pupil going up. It's obviously a tremendous impact when it comes to local property taxes, the discussion over state versus local funding, which we'll talk about in a minute, that specifically. But when you look at the salaries of school superintendents, they're pretty much entirely six-figure salaries. You look at the Concord School District, for example, not to specifically point them out, it's a high number. It's $180,000 a year for the Concord School Superintendent, which is a lot, especially when you look at support staff are making 5 times less than that, roughly. When it's a difficult conversation to have, but how do we justify that amount? I understand that it does take a lot of experience to be in these roles. It takes a lot of education. And there's many aspects to it, but I'd like to hear the argument from your side on. I don't know if you're willing to say whether it's justified or not, but why does it come to that amount for a salary?
I'll take a stab at that one right out of the gate, Mark. I guess what I would say is what CEO of any successful organization has to apologize for their salary. And I think when you look at the role of the superintendent, it truly is a 365-day a year, 24/7 responsibility. I don't care where you are or what you're doing, you're still the superintendent. And I can cite example after example of instances where family occasions or holidays or whatever have been interrupted by needs of a school district because the superintendent, it doesn't matter if it's 5:45 on Christmas morning or if you're off with your family down to Disney World. At the end of the day, those responsibilities come to your feet. And so if you want to look at a breakdown of hourly wages, it's not very much per hour. And they don't all make the salaries in the 170s and 180s. I would contest that there are a good number of folks, and even the part-time folks, they're still on call 24/7, 365, whether you're part-time or not. The responsibilities, you can't say I'm off the clock, sorry, that, the alarm is going off at the K-8 school and you're the only person that can go let the police department in. Doesn't work that way. At the end of the day, the CEO of a multi-million-dollar organization in the community is, I think, worth every penny. And it's not like some areas in the country where superintendents make, $250,000 or $500,000. That's not New Hampshire, right? That's not the New Hampshire way. That's not what our people would advocate for anyway. Our members are very sensitive and responsive to community needs. And I think that's one of the pieces of being a superintendent. Our communities want to reach out and touch their superintendent. They want to see you at activities, right? Whether it's a Friday night football game, the concerts, the curriculum fairs, the plays, the activities, they want their superintendent to be present and approachable in our communities. And that's not a 40-hour-a-week job. It really is all the time. In the days, the challenging, in New Hampshire, you may know, we have some challenging weather conditions at times. And so if you're up at 4 o'clock or 4:30 in the morning trying to gauge what the weather conditions are going to be so that you can make weather-related decisions on school cancellation, that's not an excuse to miss the school board meeting at 7 o'clock that night. You're still there, and if that's a 2-hour meeting or a 3-hour or 4-hour meeting, you're still expected to perform. And so I think that a lot of the speculation and conjecture around superintendent salaries is ill-informed, because I don't think that people really understand. And I appreciate the opportunity, AJ, that you provide to create a greater understanding of what the superintendent's role is, because it's not just someone sitting at a desk from 8 to 5 and punching the clock. It truly is a commitment of life to the work.
Yeah, I would say as a former superintendent, and Jerry was also a former superintendent, it's an incredible amount of time and energy and passion just committed to the job. And we both recognize that there's an incredible amount of time, energy, and passion in industries, doesn't matter if it's education or any industry, that there are folks who are investing their careers, they're investing their time, their energy, and their passion into those careers. I think if you did an analysis and you stood up the requirements of a superintendent, both in education, work experience, and expectations, and the responsibility that comes along with that. In some cases, it's budgets that are in some cases, Manchester and other places, it's over $100 million, and that's incredibly complex. So, and you're always focused on student learning, but as we referenced before, everything from curriculum, the research, the piloting, the vetting, the adapting, transportation, fleets and routes, facilities with capital improvements, and all of the expectations that come along with that. You have student services and supports, athletics, clubs and activities, family partnerships, communications. You're oftentimes the largest employer in that community and in surrounding communities. And with all of that personnel and just being the fabric of the community that comes along with that. And as you alluded to, you put on top of that the funding complexities, political divisiveness, legal matters, executive orders that come in that are nebulous, and the whole time you're trying to focus on what's best for students, and oftentimes become the conduit for messages that are being brought out from other organizations in your community. So you're the flashpoint. So for example, we all know that we just went through years ago a pandemic, and whatever side of the aisle that you're on, superintendents were the conduit to their communities, essentially telling them how the pandemic was going to impact their students and them and their ability to access education. No superintendent studied, as far as I know, studied epidemiology in their programming. So you have to rely on other organizations to give you information, but then you become the sin eater for that other organization because you have the community out in front of you. And all this at the same time, you're trying to manage all of those other systems. So it's an incredibly complex and nuanced job. And again, I think if you even look at other industries and you look at the number of employees and the expectations stacked up to who the CEO is, I think you definitely find, and I haven't done this study, I'm sure the study exists out there, that the superintendent position is vastly underpaid, as are education positions in general.
So the question regarding the makeup of SAUs, like, I don't know, I'm assuming the superintendent itself has really no impact on it, but I'm curious that your take when it comes to the makeup of the SAUs. It seems like a majority of the towns have their own SAU that basically is just the town, which seems to economically, as enrollments are declining over the previous 20 years. Does that make sense? Do you guys have any opinion you put out there when it comes up to the makeup of the school administrative units?
I think that getting back to something, AJ, that I said earlier, the communities in this state, the residents in the state, the citizens of the state want to reach out and touch their local superintendent. They want to know that somebody's advocating for the safety of their children. They want to know that, I think staff wants to know that the superintendent knows who they are, knows a little bit about them, and the community is invested in that. I think there are avenues open for school districts to form cooperative relationships. I think we have cooperative school districts, we have regional school districts, and we have single school districts. We have many vehicles in the state where communities can form cooperative and regional agreements. There are I think 30 something, I'm not sure of the number, 32, 36 of cooperative or regional school districts in the state. So that illustrates how neighboring communities have banded together to address and support one another in their educational growth. And so the other side of that is true as well. There are communities who feel disenchanted in a cooperative system or a regional system, who feel that they're not getting the bang for the buck and they can do a better job, a different way. And so there are mechanisms in place for those communities to withdraw and to set up their own systems. I think at the end of the day, the important part is that local communities in this state should and do have the opportunities to be one or many, and that is really the way that the local citizens should be able to decide whether they want to be part of many or go by themselves.
Yeah, and I would say that the you'll note that, and oftentimes the size of the district and the amount of the number of days or the full-time equivalent of the superintendent that will kind of calibrate the pay as well. So you look at some of the larger districts that have many towns. You look at Exeter, you look at Plymouth, you look at Conval, you look at Keene, you look at Merrimack Valley, all Kearsarge the same way. All of these towns have banded together to create charters or cooperatives, or they're just a bunch of singular districts underneath one umbrella where the superintendent and their team are managing all of those districts. So, I think that, as Jerry mentioned, there are a lot of regional and cooperative and collaborative structures in place right now.
So this may be opening a can of worms that I'm not meaning to, but I'm very curious to get your take on it. So there's been a lot of discussion of late around the what the funding model is for New Hampshire towns when it comes to it. Do we continue down the path that we've been on when it comes to a majority of the costs being taken care of at the local taxpayer level through property taxes, or we go with more state-based funding that's distributed in a different way? Andrew Valinsky's been out there. I think he had a book that just came out talking about broad-based taxes. What do you guys have a take that you put out there on it? I mean, the big deal that I think is glossed over a lot is if we go to a more state-based system where the funding comes from there, the state's going to have more say over what's happening at the local school jurisdictions. This is going to happen inevitably because politics sways back and forth, and whoever's at the state house begins to have more sway over where the funding's going. What's your take?
My immediate take might be the state already imposes its will on local school districts and doesn't necessarily pick up its tab to do so. And I say that somewhat from the experience of watching the legislature in action. There are often decisions made that impose either time commitments or procedural commitments at the local level. And that is picked up by the local taxpayers and the local communities. And so until the state fixes its funding model and provides, more equitable funding for those communities that are less resourced, then I think we're always going to struggle to meet the workforce needs of our state, because we have great workforce needs, and it's up to our community schools to provide for those needs, and for all kids to be lifted up to the same opportunity is going to require some changes in the structure of the state model. And it's I know there are legislators who don't feel that they need to spend any more money, but the fact of the matter is, I think that as a state we have an obligation to step up the game, because property taxpayers are doing their best to support their local schools, and for the greater good, the state needs to look at the funding model and support those districts who need more support.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you think about how the funding impacts education and the perception of education. And sometimes I think it's important to take a step back and look at taxes in general, and where does New Hampshire rank when it comes to per capita expectations for taxes? It's really, really low compared to other states. However, the way that New Hampshire taxes their citizens and essentially their property owners is very significant. It's two big chunks a year. It's not you're going to get taxed here, you're going to get taxed there, you're going to get taxed there, and all of that is going to fund various things. So I think that shines an extra light on the taxing structure. And then when you consider that on the state level, New Hampshire pays the least of any state in the country towards public education, the least. And then you look at that and compare results. So we have all of these local communities who are stepping up to rally to support their local education systems. And when you look at New Hampshire comparatively for results, it's among the top in the country. So we have the least amount of state level funding, and then we have localities picking up the tab, and we still have a really high performing system. But we also layer on top of that that New Hampshire is a really low tax state. It's hard to tell a property owner who always sees increasing property taxes 2 big chunks a year to convince folks that New Hampshire is a low tax state, but it really is per capita in total a relatively low tax state. I did the research on this probably almost a decade ago. And back then, New Hampshire was the second least tax state per capita in the United States.
And I'm going to get back to the value that local communities get on that, AJ. And that, we have so many really hardworking, excellent administrators, building level administrators, teachers, support staff, custodians. A lot of people in every community take an awful lot of pride in their schools. And I think that is the value, that we get to, the value proposition in the communities. And I think that people don't mind paying for good schools. The fact of the matter is the capacity to pay is the issue.
Right. If you are fortunate enough to have a lake or a ski mountain or something like that in your zip code or with, where your regional or local school is, your ability to raise and appropriate funds via tax is a lot different than if you don't. And that's where we'll see this disparity between property taxes, and that's one of the things that Andrew Valinsky and other folks have been able to illuminate as they talk to folks around the state relative to how New Hampshire does this. It's it's based on an agrarian system, and that was a long time ago.
I get 2 more questions. You guys got time?
Yeah.
Okay. So special education obviously is a huge component of that. I'm hoping to get the School Funding Fairness Project on in the show in the future, at least pull up some of their data, which really dives into a lot of it. But individualized education plans are a tremendous part of so many of the school districts in the state. Can you speak to the impact of special ed on the budgets that these superintendents are having to figure out what to do with?
Sure. I think what you're going to see kind of on a big picture is low 20% or so of students in New Hampshire are identified as special education. And then you look at budgets, and about 20% of a local budget is going to be dedicated towards special education. And there are some of the most unique learning needs, and we want to make sure that every student, regardless of their needs, has access and opportunity to an engaging education that will help move them towards citizenry and an engaging career, and something that allows them to be to aspire towards their dreams. All of those mission statements that we have from across the state. But I do think that we can try to regionalize some more of the special education services, because what happens is we have a lot of silos that are providing services, and based on geography, based on student need, based on staffing levels, you might not be able to have a full-time person to serve some of these unique needs. So that might mean that you're contracting out. And when you bring in contractors, you have a little bit less control over the costs. And so if we can think, some other states will do special education by county, or they do special education by region, where they can get some consortium pricing and you get some economies of scale. I think that's really important. But the thing is with medical advances and all of these things, the unique needs of students that are being served in public education, it's exciting, but it's also a larger responsibility, is that there are more and more students in the system that have very differentiated needs. So it just shows that public education serves all students.
And I'll just go back to a touch point earlier in the conversation that it's an investment in students. It's not a cost. It's an investment in the workforce of the future as you build up students' capacity to be able to take on more responsibility in the workforce and in life in general. There are many kids with incredible gifts to offer, and I think special education is designed to uplift those students so that they can be the best versions of themselves and contributing to society, and not be drawing from society, but be contributing to society. An investment.
So what's the future for innovation or reform in this space to address the cost and ever-changing nature of education, technology, all these different things? Talk about special ed a second ago. Most coverage of education is usually at the teacher level. It's like, oh, we're going to have this service come in and provide this part of the programming, things of that nature. What are school administrators looking to 5-10 years from now hoping to see to improve the situation when it comes to K-12 education?
Yeah, I think it's recognizing and celebrating what you're doing really well right now, but also recognizing that you always want to be evolving and that you always want to ensure that you're meeting the needs of your students and your communities, and that you're willing to grow and evolve. So I really think that it comes with increasing partnerships, and that's with businesses and industry to make sure that there are career pathways for students that can be easily identified, and that you can get job shadows out there, you can get internships, you can get more connections to business and industry. Because right now, when you have Department of Labor and you have all of these things really important included in there, you always want to make sure that you're paying attention to safety. It's it's sometimes difficult to really have a clean way to truly embed business and industry. And you've heard Jerry reference this a few times. We're really trying to focus on the development of the next workforce. And we want talented, passionate folks to stay in New Hampshire and to contribute to their communities and contribute to the state. So as we look to continue to evolve, we want to make sure that not only are we giving students the basic, really important parts of education, but beyond the ability to read, write, communicate, and compute, we want to make sure that we're creating technologically literate students who know how to leverage AI appropriately. We want to make sure that we have students that get a wide array of experiences, so they actually know and have some sort of background that says, this is what I really want to do, this is my passion, this is what fills my bucket. So, and you can't do that if you don't offer various elective experiences that continue to ask students to read, write, compute, and analyze, but in a different context. So I just think that we have to be agile. We have to make sure that we're forging partnerships with parents, we're forging partnerships with associate organizations, that we're connected to business and industry, and that we're able to engage students for all of their interests and give them all sorts of opportunity that allow them to make the decisions about their future.
Very interesting conversation, in my opinion. Really appreciate everyone that listened through all of it. I feel like there's a lot of important pieces that doesn't get out in the mainstream press very much because they always just focus really on the educations, the NEA, the American Federation of Teachers, things of that nature. They always get all the headlines. It's important to also know where these other pieces fit in. These are the CEOs of your local school district, and they do have a heavy weight that they're responsible for. Is the cost justified? That's up to each local school jurisdiction to really make up their mind on. But like I said, if you don't understand how they fit in there, you really should be very careful what you're putting out there saying that what should happen to them in the future. We should be educated on our education system and how it works. So, I don't know, leave your comments down below. What do you think of their comments? Was it justified in what they were saying with regards to how much it costs for a superintendent's office? Does it make sense for them to have this role across so many different school districts across the state? I think they do have an important piece that that when you have many schools as opposed to just an individual charter school, it's very different, and the nature of playing politics that you have to in a public education situation, it's an important piece that you can't forget about. That's good. These school boards and the press and everyone's going to be hounding them 24/7. It's not going to magically stop. Do you want your principals to be doing that instead of being able to be on the ground and working with students? Serious questions everyone should discuss. Once again, leave your comments down below. I'd love to know what other people think of what's going on with the superintendent's offices in this organization. All right, NewEnglandTake.com. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you to Grant Grock for posting every Saturday the episodes of the show. Hopefully this doesn't get me removed from there after having Professor Bashir and now these guys, but I feel like it's important to have these conversations with people that are coming from unique angles that aren't necessarily covered in your average opinion piece. NewEnglandTake.com. Talk to you soon.